Hey Goblin, you've been really practicing those war drums.
I'll bring the generic goblin noise!
Hey gang, just to let you know, you can now use the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, at flipsidegaming.com and originalmagicart.store. Using the code gets you 10% off orders $10 or more, and you get to help out the channel at the same time. I also wanted to let you know that Flipside Gaming is going to do a St. Patrick's Day sale starting March 15th at 12:01 a.m. to March 18th at 11:59 p.m. My promo code gets you 15% off everything on the site, and there will be sales for things like Dragon Shields at $7.99, and pre-orders for Modern Horizons and War of the Spark sealed product. Welcome back everybody. Today's game takes place at l'Abysse in Montreal. I got to meet two cool new people, Guylaine and Olivier, and it just so happens to be Guylaine's birthday, so wish her happy birthday. I am playing my Vial Smasher and Tymna deck, keeping a Mountain, Reiterate, Orzhov's Signet, Conqueror's Flail, Dragonskull Summit, Land Tax, and Sulphurous Springs. Vincent is back with his Thantis deck, keeping Temple of the False God, Soul Ring, Varchild, Forest, Runic Armasaur, Cinderglade, and Seasons Past. Olivier is playing his Breya deck, keeping Ethereum Sculptor, Mycosynth Wellspring, Ancient Den, Revel in Riches, Vault of Whispers, Saheeli the Gifted, and Exotic Orchard. Guylaine is playing her Omnath deck, which is the first time she's had a chance to test it out, and keeps Cinderglade, Eternal Witness, Forest, Parallel Lives, Quest for Renewal, Gruul Turf, and Kalani Heart Expedition. I win the die roll and start us off. I play a Mountain, and I pass to Vincent. Vincent plays a Forest, and he casts Soul Ring. Olivier plays a Vault of Whisperers, passing. Guylaine plays a Tap Cinderglade, and passes. I play Dragonskull Summit, and I cast Orzhov's Signet. Vincent plays his own Tap Cinderglade, and passes. Olivier plays an Ancient Den, and he casts Soul Ring. He then casts Mycosynth Wellspring to go and find a basic island, putting it to hand, and passes. Guylaine plays a Forest, and she casts Kalani Heart Expedition, passing to me. I play Sulphurous Springs, and activate the Signet. I use the white for Land Tax, and I cast Vial Smasher with my remaining mana, and I pass to Vincent. Vincent plays a Maze of Ith, and casts Varchild. Olivier plays an island, and he drops Revel in the Riches before passing turn. Guylaine casts her Quest for Renewal in her main phase, and then plays a Gruul Turf, bouncing her basic Forest back to hand. She puts a counter on her Expedition, and passes to me. Despite there being two green decks, no one has more lands than me, so Land Tax does nothing. I then activate the Signet again with my Mountain, and I lose 1 life to the Springs to help pay for Beseech the Queen. With the spell on the stack, we resolve the Vial Smasher trigger, and Guylaine loses 6 life to it. I tutor for by force, and I put it to my hand. I let the 1 floating mana go as I move to combat, and I hit Olivier for 2 with Vial Smasher. Vincent plays a Temple of the False God, and casts Runic Armasaur in his main phase. He decides to hit me with Varchild, who upon connecting, gives me 3 1/1 Survivor tokens. Olivier plays an Exotic Orchard, and brings out Breya in his main phase, gaining 2 Thopter tokens. He then passes turn. Guylaine plays her Forest, and gains another counter on her Expedition. She then casts an Oracle of Moldiah, revealing a Beast Within off the top of her library, and plays a Tap Mountain Valley from her hand, putting another counter onto her Expedition. She then sacrifices the Expedition to go and find 2 basics, and passes while searching. I'm thankful for Guylaine at this point, as I can now go and grab some basics with my Land Tax. I put 2 Plains to my hand, and I draw for turn. I then play a Plains for turn and lose 1 life from the Sulphurous Springs before losing 2 more life to cast Sign in Blood and draw 2 cards. Vial Smasher decides this time to hit Vincent for 2, and I then cast Conqueror's Flail and pass my turn, discarding down to 7. Vincent is a bit mana starved at this point, and he swings Varchild at Guylaine this time. He hits her for 3, and she gains 3 Survivor tokens as well. Vincent's second main phase then has a Crawl Space that hits the field, and at the end of turn, Olivier activates Breya's ability, sacrificing a Thopter and his Wellspring to kill Varchild. Vincent gets to draw a card, while Olivier gets to go and find a basic, while Vincent gets all of the survivors back on the board to join his team, gaining 6 1/1s. Olivier also gets a treasure token from the Revel in Riches, seeing a creature dying, and Vincent then passes turn. Olivier plays the island he found from the Wellspring dying as his land for turn, and he casts a Sharding Sphinx. Moving to combat, he swings the Thopter at me and Breya at Guylaine. We both take the hit, and Olivier gains 2 Thopters from the Sharding Sphinx's triggers. In his second main phase, he says goodbye to his treasures to help cast Ethereum Sculptor, and he passes. Guylaine draws and reveals a Hammer with Perforos off the top. She casts a Champion of Lamholt and sacrifices her Mountain Valley to go and find a land, but shortcuts first, casting Parallel Lives before going and find the land. She shuffles and reveals a Jund Panorama off the top, playing it before passing to me. I use land tax once more, and I grab a swamp this time. I play a Plains for turn, and paying 5 cast a Cleansing Nova. I decide to blow up all artifacts and enchantments, which hits my stuff as well, but thankfully it deals with the Parallel Lives and all the shenanigans on Olivier's side of the board. I roll for the Vial Smasher trigger, and once more Guylaine gets blasted for 5. I then cast a Faithless Looting, drawing 2 and discarding 2 before passing. Vincent draws for turn, mourning the loss of his Soul Ring. He looks for some consolation by attacking me with his survivors. I block one of them, but still take 5. He then passes. Olivier is very far behind at this point, and has to play a Demure Aqueduct and bounce back one of his basics to his hand before passing turn. Guylaine draws and casts Eternal Witness, returning the Parallel Lives to her hand. She also gets to put a counter on the champion, which Olivier nicely helps her out with as she recasts her Parallel Lives. I draw, and I play a Swamp for turn, and pass. Vincent draws her turn and goes to combat. He hits Olivier with one of the survivors, and passes turn. Olivier draws and plays a Saheeli the Gifted in his main phase. He upticks her to make a servo token, and then plays a Boros Garrison, bouncing an island back to his hand. Guylaine drops a dragon in her main phase, giving her champion another +1/+1 counter. She then drops a Beastmaster Ascension and moves to combat. She swings the champion at Vincent for 3 and puts a counter onto the Ascension. At the end of turn, I use Utter End to exile the Ascension, and to rub salt in the wound, Vial Smasher decides to deal 4 to Guylaine. I play Tainted Field as my land for turn, and I bring out Tymna. I roll for Vial Smasher's trigger, and once more hit Guylaine for 3, which isn't making her my biggest fan this game. I then swing Vial Smasher at Olivier again, who takes the hit for 2. In my second main phase, I lose 1 life to draw a card from Tymna's ability, and I pass turn. Vincent plays a Swamp and casts Skyshroud Claim, as his temple is now active. He grabs an Overgrown Tomb and a Forest, putting them to the field and taking 2 to have the tomb come in untapped. Vincent then makes a deal with Olivier by casting a Skullwinder, and Olivier returns his Revel in Riches while Vincent brings back his Skyshroud Claim. He then passes. Olivier plays a Seat of the Synod as his land for turn, and upticks Saheeli to make his next spell cost 2 less because of the artifacts. He's then able to recast Revel in Riches for a reduced cost, and passes. Guylaine draws and reveals Titania off the top of her library. She moves to combat and swings everything but her Oracle at me for 10, which I can't block thanks to the champion. Her second main phase has her casting her commander, Omnath the Angry Jellybean, and she passes to me. I flashback Faithless Looting and roll for the Vial Smasher trigger, which of course hits Guylaine, who is now out for blood. I draw 2 and discard 2, not finding a good enough answer. I then cast Knight's Whisper, losing 2 life to draw 2 more cards, and I move to combat. I swing Tymna this time at Olivier, gaining 2 life as she connects, and I choose not to put any life into her post-combat main phase ability, as I'm pretty sure I'll need every point I can get for the next time Guylaine swings at me, so I pass to Vincent. Vincent casts his Skyshroud Claim in his main phase and goes to find 2 more forests, ramping himself back into the game. We then see a Stolen Strategy hit the field, and he moves to combat. He swings his 5 survivors at Saheeli, and Olivier just lets her take the hit. Olivier plays an island for turn and upticks Saheeli in his main phase. This helps him reduce the cost of Breya, who comes in once more with her Thopter buddies. He then casts a Mind Stone and passes. Guylaine draws and reveals a Thunderfoot Baloth off the top. She pays 5 in her main phase for an Aestheticism, and then cracks the Jund Panorama to go and find a basic forest or mountain. She settles for a mountain, which gives her an elemental token from Omnath and a dragon egg from the Nesting Dragon, which are both doubled because of Parallel Lives. This gives her champion 4 more +1/+1 counters, and things are looking pretty grim for our hero. Guylaine moves to combat and swings the champion at me, Omnath at Olivier. We don't really have much of a choice, so we take the hit, and then Guylaine remembers to reveal a Fervor off the top of her library. I play a mountain for my turn, and I cast the Tear half of Wear and Tear to blow up Stolen Strategy. Sadly, Vial Smasher has a mind of her own and blasts Guylaine for 3 again. I then cast a Weathered Wayfarer, and I pass to Vincent. Vincent pays 8 in his main phase for a Sandworm Convergence. He then plays Daragaz's Caldera as his land for turn, and he bounces a basic back to his hand. He passes, and at the end of turn makes a 5/5 worm token. Olivier plays his land for turn and upticks Saheeli, reducing the cost of his next spell by 6 colorless. This lets him cast a Helm of the Host for free, which is pretty sweet, and he gears Breya up with it, while Vincent makes the good point that I probably should have saved my wear and tear for this turn. Olivier then plays the Commander Sphere and moves to combat, making a copy of Breya, who also comes in and gives him more Thopters. He swings the 2 older Thopters at Guylaine, dealing 2, and passes. Guylaine draws and reveals Greater Good off the top. She moves to combat, swinging an Elemental, the Eternal Witness, and the Nesting Dragon at me for lethal, and an Elemental at Vincent, and the Champion at Olivier. Before damage, Olivier sacrifices some artifacts to Breya's ability to kill my Weathered Wayfarer, and gains more treasure tokens. Vincent draws from the Runic Armasaur trigger, and also uses Golgari Charm to blow up the Aestheticism, and then uses his Maze of Ith to remove the Elemental swinging at him from combat. Unfortunately, I still die, and in her second main phase, Guylaine casts Lightning Greaves, putting them onto the Jelly Bean, and then casts Fervor, passing turn. Vincent plays a Forest first turn, and he casts Seasons Past. He returns the Charm, Stolen Strategy, Skyshroud Claim, Soul Ring, and Crawl Space to hand. He then casts the Soul Ring and casts Skyshroud Claim again, making this his 3rd time this game. He grabs 2 more forests and puts them to the field. He then casts Crawl Space, and at the end of turn makes a Worm, passing. Olivier makes a blue with his Sphere and sacrifices it to draw a card. He plays an Ash Baron as his land for turn and uses the blue floating plus the Ash Barons to activate Breya's ability. Vincent draws from this with his Armasaur, and Olivier decides to give the Nesting Dragon -4/-4, killing it. This also gives him a treasure token from the Revel in Riches. He then upticks Saheeli to make a servo and moves to combat. He makes his 3rd Breya token, making 2 more Thopters as she enters. We then see Olivier activating Breya's ability twice, with Vincent drawing twice, and Olivier uses Breya's -4/-4 twice on the Champion of Lambhold, gaining a treasure token as she dies. Guylaine draws for turn and reveals Cultivate off the top. She casts Greater Good in her main phase and moves to combat. She swings one of the Elementals at Olivier and one at Saheeli. Before damage, Olivier sacrifices 2 artifacts to Breya's ability while Vincent draws a card, and he gives the Elemental attacking Saheeli -4/-4, so she only loses 1 loyalty. In her second main phase, Guylaine then sacrifices the 1/1 Elemental, and she draws 1 card and discards 3 cards, and deals 3 damage to Saheeli to take her out. Olivier gains another treasure token, and Guylaine then plays a forest off the top of her library, gaining 2 fresh Elemental tokens. She then sacrifices the second Elemental who attacked, drawing 5 and discarding 3, and then dealing 3 damage to Vincent. She then casts a Flamekin Harbinger and goes to find an Elemental, putting the new Multani on top of her library. Guylaine then casts an Elemental Bond to help her draw power, and she sacrifices another Elemental to Greater Good. She draws 5 and deals 3 to Vincent and has to discard 3. Olivier also gains another treasure tokens, and we then move to Vincent's turn. Vincent draws and plays Grenzo Havoc Raiser in his main phase. Moving to combat, he swings his survivors at Olivier, who blocks one of them and gets a treasure token as it dies. With the other 4 connecting, Vincent gets to exile the top 4 cards of Olivier's library. In his second main phase, Vincent then casts an Acidic Slime and blows up Guylaine's Lightning Greaves. He then plays a Smoldering Marsh which comes in untapped, and he recasts Stolen Strategy, passing. Olivier plays a tapped Nomad Outpost for his turn and moves to combat. He makes another Breya token and more Thopters. He then passes through combat and casts Vidalcan Orrery, doing the folks at the command zone proud. He then passes turn. Guylaine draws and reveals a Skyshroud Claim off the top. She casts Multani, who also has haste because of the fervor, and counts up all of her lands. Multani's at 12/12, which is not huge, but still a sizable threat. She draws from the Elemental Bond trigger and reveals a forest off the top, which she plays and gains another 2 Elemental tokens and draws 2. She then reveals another forest, playing it off the top and gaining another Omnath trigger. Responding to it, Olivier flashes in a Mere Retriever and Guylaine gains 2 more tokens. Moving to combat, Multani and an Elemental go at Vincent, who untaps Multani with his Maze and blocks the Elemental with his Acidic Slime. With 2 creatures dying, Olivier gains 2 more treasure tokens. And with the Elemental dying, Guylaine also gets to use the Omnath trigger to bolt Grenzo. In her second main phase, Guylaine sacrifices Multani to Greater Good, drawing 12 and discarding 3, and with Multani dying, she bolts Olivier for 3. With an enormous grip of cards now, she discards Hurricane, fires if you have a Maya, and a Forest. She then plays a Zuza, and then another Forest, gaining 2 more elementals from Omnath, and then another Forest, gaining 2 more. She then casts Exploration before finally dropping Kessig Wolfrun, gaining 2 more elementals. Ghislaine then remembers she had a bunch of draw triggers from the elemental bond, which she'd overlooked in all of her excitement to make elementals, and draws them. Ghislaine then sacrifices the Flamekin Harbinger to draw 1 and discard 3, revealing a mountain off the top. She sacrifices 3 elementals to the greater good, and puts all the death triggers targeting Olivier. With the 3rd trigger on the stack, Olivier sacrifices the Mirror Retriever and a Thopter to Breya, which draws Vincent a card because of his runic Armasaur, and lets Olivier return a Sharding Sphinx to his hand. He has the Breya ability gaining him 5 life, jumping to 13, and then takes 9. Ghislaine then casts a Soul Ring and casts Shamanic Revelation, drawing 13 cards and gaining 32 life. Yikes. Ghislaine then passes, having to discard basically half of her library to get down to 7 cards. At the end of turn, Vincent uses Golgari Charm to blow up Revel in Riches. Vincent's Stolen Strategy triggers, and Olivier and Ghislaine reveal their top cards, putting them into exile. Vincent doesn't want to cast in Winding Clock, but does cast Ghislaine's Collective Unconscious, drawing 9 more cards. At this point, Vincent and Olivier are discussing how to best deal with Ghislaine, who remembers to reveal her top card, and we see a Thunderfoot Baloth. Vincent then drops a Rampaging Baloth, and plays a Forest, gaining a Beast token from the Baloth's trigger. Vincent then casts one of my favorite spells, Disrupt Decorum, forcing his opponents to attack on their turns, anyone but Vincent. He then plays a Burgeoning and passes. At the end of turn, he gets a Worm token from the Convergence, and Olivier also sacrifices 1 treasure token to flash in Goblin Welder. He then sacrifices 5 more and taps his Ash Barrens to help cast Sharding Sphinx. Olivier draws for turn and moves to combat, making like his 1 millionth Breya token and gaining 2 more Thopters as she comes in. He has to attack at this point, and he swings Breya and the Thopters that can attack Ghislaine. Realizing he has to swing the Welder, he taps it and uses its ability, swapping his new Breya for a Commander Sphere, which lets Vincent draw a card. Olivier then floats 1 blue and sacrifices the Spear to draw a card, and he casts Impulse. He resolves the Impulse, and Ghislaine decides to just take the hit for 6, which lets Olivier make 3 more Thopter tokens thanks to the Sphinx, who, in hindsight, should have had to attack. Olivier then passes to Ghislaine. Ghislaine draws and reveals a Stomping Ground off the top. Before moving from her draw step, Olivier flashes in Shrewd Negotiations, swapping a Thopter token of his with Vincent's Crawl Space. Olivier then sacrifices 2 Thopters to Breya's ability, which lets Vincent draw and gains 5 more life. Declaring that Olivier and Vincent won't even live to her combat step, Ghislaine uses Decimate to take care of Breya as the creature, Stolen Strategy as the enchantment, the other Breya as an artifact, and Seed of the Synod as a land. Before they die though, Olivier activates one of his Breyas a few times, sacrificing some artifacts to go to 24 life, and draws Vincent some cards. Ghislaine isn't too fazed by this, as she drops a Warstorm Surge and a Crucible of Worlds. She then plays a Ghost Quarter from her graveyard, which triggers Vincent's Burgeoning, letting him play a Bajuka Bog to exile her graveyard, which is a spicy response. She still gets 2 elemental tokens from the Ghost Quarter coming in, and has Warstorm Surge deal 10 to Vincent. She then plays a Stomping Ground off the top, gaining 2 more tokens and dealing 10 to Olivier. She also gets to draw a few more cards, and wanting to finish the game with a bit of Razzle Dazzle, she casts Blasphemous Act, and with all the elementals dying, she has more than enough triggers to finish the guys off. Game review time. I think in this game, Vincent unfortunately struggled with some mana issues, having the Temple of the False God in his opening hand, but never getting to 5 lands early on really set him back, especially when his 4th land didn't tap for anything. He did manage to do a very good job of recasting Skyshroud Claim about 4 million times in this game, and was able to get back into the game, but at that point he really was pretty far behind in terms of card draw and board position. But, let it be said, it didn't stop him from messing with people's strategies by casting spells like Disrupt Decorum, Stolen Strategy, and Sandworm Convergence. I think unfortunately for Olivier, he suffered the most from my Cleansing Nova, losing lands and artifact ramp. He was able to build his resources back up thanks to Revel in the Riches, which did a ton of work this game, and I even think he had enough on board to be able to kill Ghislaine at some point, but unfortunately it put him into a bit of a standoff. He'd be able to activate his abilities to try and deal damage to her, but she could probably take him out in response to his triggers being on the stack, which led to them both basically not being able to do anything to each other. This lasted until she was able to resolve a shamanic revelation, which put her far, far ahead. Omnath decks are particularly scary, especially when they're heavily built around elementals. Most of the creatures in her deck, when they died, would deal 3 to players, and she ran a lot of the cards that I've come to expect to see in an Angry Jellybean deck. Considering that when we sat down, she said she'd only played the deck a handful of times, like under 5, I think she played it better than I would have ever had I had a deck that new. Unfortunately for me this game, in addition to doing a lot of damage to myself, which I've come to expect from the deck anyway since a lot of my black draw spells tend to cause me life loss, Vial Smasher insisted on consistently poking the mama bear of the table. I don't blame Guylaine for killing me, especially considering Vial Smasher did upwards of 10 to 12 damage to her, but I do wish that Vial Smasher had decided to be a little bit more giving with her triggers. But what can you do? Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/MTGMudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/MTGMudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.